Good afternoon. A little bit more enthusiastic. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I welcome us all in peace with deep gratitude. I want to start with a poem that I wrote for the new year. I love all of you intensely. Forgive me if in any way I have not honored your wholeness. Forgive me if in any way I have not invited your wholeness. Forgive me if in any way I have not embraced your wholeness. I am grateful for the existence of each and every one of you. I wish for all of you the fulfillment of the dreams of your heart in this new year of sweetness, in this new year of justice, in this new year of equity, in this new year of accessibility for all, in this new year of Black Lives Mattering still, this new year of heart expansion, this new year of newness, this new year of new paradigms, this new year of countering the destruction of Pachamama, this new year of morphing religious hardness into oceans of sweetness, remembrance, and wholeness. This new year, inshallah, this new year. As we bless the four directions, as we gather in this place, surrounded by these trees, under this sky, enjoying this breeze, which will start at some point, remembering all of the creatures and beings who were here before us, the first people of the land, the Miwok, the Yokut, the Mowekma Ohlone, the Pomo, the Modok, asking the permission of the trees and of all the creatures and beings of this place, under this sky, with immense gratitude for a new year, for equinox and for Eid and anything else juicy we are celebrating, with immense gratitude for our ancestors, with their lives, with their passions, with their joys, with their juiciness, and yes, with their messiness. These people deeply connected to the earth, to Pachamama and her care, deeply connected to the changing seasons and to the exhalations and inhalations of the earth, of her waters, of her skies, of her insides and outsides. We ask their permission to be. As we gather to celebrate lives offered in service, lives offered in liberation, lives offered in revolution. This is a difficult job. Preaching ordinations is always a difficult job because most people are like, what's an ordination anyway? Are they going to get crowned? Are they going to get knighted? Do we get special prizes for attending? What exactly is going to happen? An ordination means a setting apart. But in different religious traditions, it's expressed in different ways. For example, here today we are saying, this community gathered, because you cannot ordain without a community, this community gathered will ordain certain people. In a Buddhist community, we would say, so-and-so is ordaining as a nun, or I ordained as a monk in such and such a time. In Islam, we don't have any kind of ordination whatsoever. But if you become a sheikh, sheikha, a peer, you're set apart in a ceremony that calls out the entire mystical lineage and places you in that lineage. So we gather here in this act of community to recognize and set apart these individuals basically as full-time revolutionaries of the spirit in the intersections of the world. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to make some revolution. But to decide to offer oneself in this act, which in Hebrew is called a smicha, which is close to rejoicing, in this time when we live in a culture where we say Black Lives Matter, but do they really? And the reason we have to say Black Lives Matter is that we don't act, by and large, as though they actually matter. To say Black Lives Matter doesn't mean that other lives do not matter. It calls our attention to something we have egregiously overlooked and punished people for being in that category, even though this country was built by the blood, sweat, and tears of indigenous people who were massacred and Africans who were brought to the Americas, to build the Americas, but disappeared and erased. What does it mean to be a spiritual leader when we read about a church where someone just can walk in and kill people? That's something we think, oh, that happened a long time ago. Those kind of things happened in Europe during the Holocaust or the lead up to the Holocaust. They don't happen anymore. But just several months ago, we experienced that. Black churches were destroyed throughout the South by fires. What does it mean to be an interfaith spiritual leader in that context? What does it mean to be an interfaith, intersectional, I throw that in, spiritual leader when the very body of the earth is on fire? With the fires we experience here in California, hundreds of homes destroyed and displaced, 13,000 people actually displaced, or the 17,000 dead refugees at the bottom of the Mediterranean. Not only in Syria, but also in Oakland and Richmond, Black and brown children shot at will, incarcerated, enslaved in the new plantation system, condemned to lives of slavery and death. What does it mean to be an interfaith, intersectional spiritual leader in times such as these? It means to be in closeness to the beloved, to be in intimate relationship with the beloved. But to be in that relationship with the beloved, it is also to be in intimate relationship with all of creation. It is to live consciously. It is to work on balancing our egos and, most importantly, waking up. I want to offer from our interfaith heritage two examples, a shiro and a hero of mine who were interfaith radicals and revolutionaries. And you'll see why in a moment. For me, these people chose, as our ordinands have today, chose to be examples of embodied, organic multi-religiosity. The first is a woman known as Mataji, or Sister Vandana. She died 2 years ago, and I met her in the late 70s in Paris when I was a student. Mataji, or Sister Vandana, was a Roman Catholic religious. She was one of the Madams of the Sacred Heart, which is a pretty elite religious community, and she was an educator. She herself was born into a Parsi family, into a Zoroastrian family. And in her studies, she became Roman Catholic. And as a Roman Catholic nun, she became one of the leaders of what was called the Indian ashram movement. That is to say, Indian Roman Catholic monastics who sought to live in a way that reflected the Dharmic and Vedic traditions of Hindu spirituality. She learned music, she performed, she lived as a hermit, she lived as a traveling teacher. Some people thought she wasn't a real Catholic because of wearing the orange color of asceticism, of being set apart, as a sannyasin, someone dedicated to the path. Some people said her theology was very shaky. A lot of us have often heard that when we speak truth to power. Sister Vandana wrote hymns, for example, in Hindi, and would perform them, and became internationally known as a holder of the space of the cave of the heart. When she left us in 2013, many people around the world were deeply saddened. But I bring her here today as an example of what you are doing, as an example of these intersectional, interfaith, spiritual leaders. Now what Sister Vandana Mataji did doesn't seem like such a big thing. Oh yeah, we'll have a group, we'll get together, we'll sing some Christian kirtan, we'll meditate. This is 2015. So nobody thinks so much about that, especially here in the Bay Area, right? But at the time this began, it was extremely controversial. And she went on and on and on. So she was a contemplative in a world of action and a radical activist in a world of contemplation. The other example that I bring today, because of where we are and who we are as people of multiple paths, is Swami Abhishektananda. And Swamiji was also a mixed person. He was a Breton Benedictine monk from Brittany in France. And that's very important to specify that he was from Brittany and that he was a Breton. And he went to live in India and found himself completely drawn to indigenous spirituality and practice. It was as though he had found another part of himself that he knew was there, but didn't know how to express. And he spent years anguishing over the fact of, for example, he writes, I'm sitting in a room, it's midnight between the 24th and the 25th of December. I should be preparing to celebrate the midnight mass of the Nativity, yet I'm hearing these kirtans and my heart's feeling torn, and I want to sing kirtan, but I should say the mass, and I should say it in Latin, but really I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Pages and pages about his internal struggle. He had such important contact with one of the great mystics of our age, Sri Ramana Maharshi, and spent a lot of time meditating alone in caves. he specifically also was very, very poorly understood and very poorly received. Why would a European want to walk around with just one piece of cloth on and live like us, people would say? So deep are the poisons of internalized colonialism and oppression. People couldn't understand. Why would he want to do that? Why would these three want to do what they're doing? And have us come and sit here this afternoon and figure out, what does this mean for the world? But what Swamiji taught was the importance of the message of the oneness of all being. The oneness of all being, that things we experience as being separate, as being separated, as having walls between them, are actually not separate. They answered the call to live consciously, and they radically transformed the landscape of spiritual practice. To be very honest, if I had not been given a book of Swamiji when I was 17 years old, when I was a student at Vassar, I might not be standing here today. And it was a teeny book, so if you're thinking about writing anything, write it. It's a very thin book called one thing, prayer. Completely changed my life, so go for it. Go for it. We also need to have revolutionary, interfaith, intersectional. And when I say intersectional, I don't just mean people that stand on the corner, but I mean people who stand and live at the corner of many different identities and locations, sexualities, gender expression, race, ability, disability, class, language, holding all of that. Because we are beings in the world. I get very upset when people say, well, I'm spiritual, but I'm not political. And I'm like, do you live in a body? If you live in a body, and you live in a body of bodies, you are political. Political only means pertaining to the police, not the 5-0 police, but the city. It means those who are living in the city. So we are all members of this body called the city. And what is our work? Our work is to bring contemplation into the world of action and bring action into the world of contemplation. Living consciously means living in nearness. Nearness, not necessarily geographical nearness, but in closeness of heart, understanding that what happens to a young kid in Pelican Bay is happening to me as well. Living consciously means also to live in return. These are the days of teshuvah in Hebrew, or tauba in Arabic, of returning. Returning to oneness. Returning to non-duality. Returning to saying there is not a you and a me, a them and a us. These three beings return to mindfulness. They return and invite us to return to a world, a life beyond either or thinking. They return to oceans of sweetness and wholeness and remembrance. Spirituality and our theologies and ethics are not separable. This is what these mystics of whom I have spoken today, because also sometimes people think there's only one way of being interfaith, right? There's many ways as there are beings, as there are breaths in the universe. I will air condition my homily, and As our beloved Reb Zalman would say, I'm going to come in for a landing now. I want to offer this from our beloved Mevlana Jodin Rumi. The breeze at dawn has secrets to tell you. This I address especially to the three of you. Don't go back to sleep. You must ask for what you really want. Don't go back to sleep. People are going back and forth across the doorsill where the worlds touch. The door is round and open. Don't go back to sleep. Don't go back to the sleep of them and us. Don't go back to sleep. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all never be separated from the sacred happiness which is sorrowless. May all live in equanimity without too much attachment and too much aversion, and live believing in the equality of all that lives. May you continue to be bold DJs of the whole being and of the environment, mixing and remixing, placing the rhymes and the rhythms of the desires of the heart over the music of liberation, transformation, and revolution of the soul. You three especially, thank you for existing.